Okay, so this is a video we're going to be talking about the competence to exercise the right to remain silent. This follows our classroom textbook using the Melton et al. 2018 from the pages 161 to 162 and then pages 164 to 171. Okay. So first we have this media link that's also shared in the discussion part, as well as what's listed here. It's a very brief video, about 5 minutes. It goes over why police give you those Miranda rights and then when they're best practiced. Okay. As an overview for this whole PowerPoint presentation, we have our contents slash objective for this video. So our main goal is to establish what the competency to exercise the right to remain silent is. We'll be doing this using our textbook. And then because our textbook lays it out so nicely, we're going to follow it the same way, going into the law of confessions and then looking at associated court cases. And then we're going to look at some evaluation issues such as knowing and intelligent, voluntary, and false confession research. And then we have a discussion question at the end. Okay. What does it mean to be competent in exercising the right to remain silent? This can usually be raised at the very beginning. So this is just pre-trial stuff, usually at a suppression hearing. Usually when a psychologist is going to be asked to look into this, they're going to need some background information. This is going to be when we dive into the law of confessions, and we're going to look at these critical court cases here for the Brown v. Mississippi, Miranda v. Arizona, Rhode Island v. Innis, and Colorado v. Conley. They're going to be very important when we decide the competency in exercising the right to remain silent. We have to look at these precedented cases. So, looking at the law of confessions as outlined by our Melton textbook, it's a very conflicting law to look at. In one hand, we want to get a confession from a guilty defendant, but sometimes the way we get those confessions through interrogation are through a break will and are sometimes unfair. So when we dive into those and we want to look at it, what do we mean by when we say they're unfair? We have to look at it in terms of these cases. So for example, in the Brown v. Mississippi 1936 case, we have a basic confession from 3 African Americans were obtained when the interrogation used physical torture, hanging, and severe beating. The defendants were not given the due process of law as laid out in the 14th Amendment. The validity of the confession depends on if the defendants confess to end the interrogation or if they actually committed the crime. Here, it's mostly looking at, are they just confessing because they want the torture to end, or did they actually commit the crime? So the important outcome here is that the Supreme Court said constitutional limits on police and interrogations. So we just have to remember, give them their due process. These are people too. Yes. Okay. Miranda v. Arizona. This is where we get the Miranda rights. Basic overview. It builds on the Fifth Amendment about self-incrimination. And here we get the implementation of per se rules. This means once a suspect asks for an attorney, all interrogation processes must stop, but it cannot be a vague ask. It can't be something to the effect of, maybe I should speak to an attorney, maybe I should talk to a lawyer. It has to be deliberate in terms of, I want a lawyer. It has to be deliberate. Okay, important outcome. Police must tell the suspect their constitutional rights before being interrogated. Okay. Road v. Innis. This one is an interesting point of view because when I was doing the overview, the best way it could be summed up was by looking at the picture here on the slide. We've got the two cops that are just passively talking about the case and the suspects in the back. Too bad we couldn't find the shotgun. Be a real shame if some poor kids found it. This gun was placed around by a school that had like disabled children around it, and the suspect overheard it and eventually took them to the shotgun. The case here, the question is, did this violate Miranda rights? Um, Initially, it violated the rights, but when it was brought to the Supreme Court, it was overturned because there was no coercion used in getting the suspect to tell them where the gun was. It was not a violation of Miranda rights. Okay. In addition to that, just remember, be wary of mental illness or intellectual disability when deciding if the information that they're offering is voluntary. And we'll have more on voluntary here in the next couple slides. Okay, next important case, we have Colorado v. Conley, 1986. Overview, Conley confessed to a crime that happened months before, all while police told him he did not need to give any self-incriminating details. While talking to the police, he did not report any signs of mental illness. The defense argued, with significant evidence of Conley's impairment status, including being admitted to a psychiatric hospital. The important outcome is, unless the police take advantage of a suspect's mental disability, due process and Miranda are not implicated because no governmental coercion has occurred. In this case specifically, it does say that the police did tell him multiple times, you don't need to tell us anything, you can speak to a lawyer first, but he just kept talking. So when the defense argued that, well, he was impaired, the police did not take note of any signs of impairment, so they weren't trying to coerce him into any information. Okay. Next, we're going to come into some evaluation issues. Here we are looking at knowing and intelligence. With knowing and intelligence, it's mostly about the skills that they just don't have yet. So they don't necessarily understand the words and the intelligence is compromised. So in Melton et al. Informs that 23% of suspects do not understand at least one of the Miranda rights, which require a middle school reading capacity or capability. So already they don't have that ability to understand what it is that is being told to them. Groups like those with mental illness and juveniles are at risk of not fully understanding and knowing what it is meant by the Miranda rights. They can't understand what's being told, so they're at risk for not understanding it in the terms of a court process. And then when we go into some tests that they can give you, Miranda for the Miranda rights, the Melton et al. 2018. These tests are included in the comprehension of Miranda rights recognition, comprehension of Miranda vocabulary, and function of rights in interrogation. These are some tests that the psychiatrist, psychologist, can give to assess the knowing and intelligence part in this evaluation to see if they really do understand the Miranda rights or if there's a miscommunication happening. Okay. Evaluation issues in part 2. We've got the terms of voluntary. Certain aspects of a suspect's character need to be taken into account. This can be things like, was the suspect intoxicated? Do they have a mental illness? Are they intellectually disabled, juvenile or youth? Because sometimes they are not going to fully understand what's happening. We know that uh, Melton et al. Explains that juveniles and youths particularly want to be, goodness gracious, they want to please the authorities and that they are also more susceptible, especially juveniles when they get negative feedback. Intellectual disabilities may contribute to some having a struggle with a social intelligence, so they're not really going to understand the motives behind the questions that are being asked of them, and they're not going to understand the consequences of the answers that they give. These are some of the things that Melton et al. Has explained that I thought were important to put on here. Some factors that Melton et al. Suggests that can lead to voluntary false confessions would be a desire for notoriety, a way to get out of an interrogation, or a temporary feeling of guilt. False confession research. When police use interrogation techniques that use both maximalization and minimalization, it can lead to an increase in false confessions. Maximalization is going to be not confessions that are negative consequences or that are lying about evidence. Minimalization is giving reason why the criminal uh, makes sense or wanting to help the suspect. Um, And then we have some examples that we can look at in the computer crash paradigm and the cheating paradigm. The computer crash program was a test that they ran that they were told, the suspects were told if they hit a button, the computer was going to crash. And even though they did not actually hit the button, they were told that they hit the button that caused the crash, and they confessed to doing it because they honestly just thought it could have been their mistake. And then there's the cheating paradigm where they would confess to cheating even though they didn't because they didn't think that cheating had a significant consequence. Okay. And then, so in summary from this, we have the discussion question, just something to think about. How have police interrogation tactics needed to change to best achieve both justice for crime, so, getting that guilty confession, and preserving dignity for the suspect, not beating the suspect, not getting involuntary information, maybe even how they're looking at the Miranda rights. Something to think about would be that the Innis case, right, where he told them where they could find the shotgun, but that was passively given to them. That would be something that maybe you could talk about for that. And then here are my resources that I used for this case. We have our important court cases that we looked at. We've got our tech class textbook, and then we have the case study about the computer crash and the cheating confession paradigms. Okay, and that is it.